Hey y'all, it's Brittany and welcome back. This week we'll be talking about another story that I really want to focus on the facts of the case. So I'm removing that distraction of doing makeup in a video while trying to tell a story again this week. So it'll be a sit down video. But this story is all about the case of Andrew Suh, but not only his case, the entire story of the Suh family. It's really important to understand the background and the buildup of Andrew Suh and his sibling Kathy to really understand what took place and the actual crime that Andrew is currently imprisoned for. This is definitely a case that involves culture and your morals and the way that you're brought up and the clash of cultures of immigrants moving into an American society and having to abide by those laws. This really is a case that I felt like needed to be shared because it really tells the story of that battle that immigrants internally have to deal with of abiding by the laws of the U.S. that they swore to abide by when they became citizens, and the cultural upbringing that they have and those values and how they're brought up inside their home that they have to also deal with and abide by. So I hope you guys will join me on this week's journey, and I know you will, so stay tuned. All right, you guys, so first and foremost, as always, we start the show off with gratitude. And I really want to thank you guys for all the growth, all the changes, all the variation, because I'm trying to figure out the best way to present these stories to you guys on a consistent basis. So I've taken a little bit of time trying to plan ahead a bit and get ahead so that I can start to consistently bring you more information and more cases as I originally planned to do. If you're already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And thank you for commenting and keeping the interaction for this channel up. Also, if you are just finding my channel or if you've been around for a while and you just have not subscribed, go ahead and make sure you hit that subscription button so that you don't miss any of the new content that I bring out for you guys. Also, make sure you hit that notification bell so that you get notified when I put new things out. And also make sure you like the video and you engage in those comments. Engagement by liking and commenting is the #1 way to help me continue to grow. So I would greatly appreciate it if you guys did so. I'm always commenting back. It may take me a few, but I'm gonna get back to you. All right, let's get started with this week's video. Really quick, before we hop into the story, I just wanted to say thank you to Rose Forever, New York. And these are the flowers that they sent me, guys. This is a beautiful velvet box of white roses. They are absolutely beautiful. I love these. I have them actually sitting on my makeup vanity and I absolutely love them. They're beautiful. They're all white roses that will last at least a year. And I wanted to show these to you guys because they sent them to me just as a gift and I'm thankful for that. But if you guys love these types of things, these luxurious types of things, and want to give them as a gift or just something for yourself, because let's shower ourselves, there's a little bit of something down below. I have a link for you guys and make sure you check them out. Now, first and foremost, let me preface this by saying I chose this story because of the overarching story that it conveys to you guys. I was originally going to cover the Jelani Day case, but for the very exact reason that I mentioned that I would not cover the Gabby Petito case, outside of her just getting way more coverage than Jelani Day, which is why I was going to cover him in the first place. But there was recently information that came out and everyone was spreading and making videos about organ harvesting and things like that surrounding his case. And his family came out and spoke out about it and said that it was completely untrue. These are exactly the reasons why I do not share cases that are still ongoing, that are not cold cases, because things change by the minute, by the day. One thing that's reported that you think is true, it's not. So I chose to do today's case instead because this is a case, while it is a solved case, it is a case that still is very important in the politics and the structure and the way that we want everyone in the US to live and abide by this certain set of rules. So it's still very relevant, although it is a solved case. And it is active in a way, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, the Suh family was originally from Seoul, South Korea, and originally they had 2 children. They had an older son, and then they had a younger daughter by the name of Catherine. Now, their older son, I know his name, and I'll put it here, but I will not butcher that baby's name out of the respect for his family. But their older son, he was said to be, just a typical playful, energetic little boy. And one day in their apartment, as he was playing around the apartment building, he actually found his way onto the roof. And some kind of way, he unfortunately fell off of the apartment building roof and injured his head pretty severely, to the point where he was brain dead and pretty much in a vegetative state. Now, after some time had passed, the family eventually chose to take their older son off of life support, and shortly after stopping the life support measures, he passed away. Now, in Korean culture, having a son is absolutely monumental. It is the most important thing for a family, or one of the most important things for a Korean family, because the son is who carries on that family name. A daughter, while great, is not as important, not as pivotal as having a son. So losing their son was absolutely detrimental to this family. Absolutely. And not only was it detrimental to the parents, but it was also detrimental to their daughter, Catherine, because their older son was her big brother. He was the person who protected her from bullies and made sure she was okay and looked out for her in every way, even though they were 2 young kids. So she lost a huge piece of her life as well. Now, of course, after losing a son, the Suh family was in complete shock, and they just felt like Korea was not a safe place for them to live anymore. So they decided that maybe moving to America would be a better, safer option to raise their family. Now, going back to the importance of having a son, both of the Suh parents were, not young spring chickens. And I believe the mom was in her 40s at this point. So she was really on that cusp of just not being able to have children anymore. But because having a son was so important, their father, Ronald, gave their mother, Elizabeth, an ultimatum. He basically said, either you're going to give me another son, or I am divorcing you. That's it, and that's all. So she knew that she was on that cusp of being too old to carry a child. So she opted to take a bunch of experimental fertility treatments that eventually ended up working. And this is where Andrew came in. Now, he wasn't an older son, but he was a son, and that was the important thing. It was also said that Andrew was born with the exact same birthmark as his older brother who had passed. So this was the reincarnation of their first son, which was a blessing to them. So, of course, they doted on their new son. They praised their son. And it almost felt like they threw Catherine, or Kathy, by the wayside. She just wasn't as important to the family dynamic as Andrew was. And there's this strange dynamic with this family, because on the one hand, you have this father who is so enamored and so needing to have a son, and he's finally got his son after losing one, and he has no love basically left to give to his daughter. He just despises his daughter because at this point a girl is useless to him. And then on the other hand, you have this daughter, Kathy, who is getting no love from her father, who is the most important figure in the family, and she has this new brother who she is being treated less than. And on top of that, she lost the brother that she loved, the big brother that protected her, for this new younger brother who was just basically taking from her as she saw it. So there's this really difficult dynamic going on with this family. Now, as a kid, Andrew grew up as the perfect son, the model son. He acted a lot as the translator for his parents who spoke pretty broken English. So he translated for them when they were doing business dealings and different things like that. They also ran a small family store, so he helped out a lot with that as well. Now, Kathy also helped out a lot with translations as well, but that's pretty typical in a first generation immigrant family. My husband and his sister, who's first generation Italian, they still to this day, and their parents have been here for a while, they still to this day have to help out with some things that their parents don't quite understand because of being immigrant. Now, of course, Andrew was always bragged on as the pride and joy of the family. And then there's this daughter, Kathy. Now, like many families and immigrant communities, they have their own small businesses because communities support their own community. And the kids oftentimes help out a lot with these family businesses. So the routine for the Suh kids was basically, especially Andrew, to, get up early before school, go help out at the store, go to school, come back from school, go back to help out at the store until it was time to go to bed, and do it all again the next day. So that was pretty much his routine, and he had no problem with that. He understood the cultural duties that he had, regardless of where they were actually living at the time. So Andrew's father had his favorite, which was Andrew. And then on the other hand, they had a rebellious daughter, and she was rebellious because she wasn't getting the love that she needed and all of the trauma that had happened around her older brother. So her father made it clear that he was not fond of her. She was not a obedient daughter. She did not commit herself to the family and the betterment of the family. She was dating outside of her race. She would date Latin men, and the father was not very happy with that. So he would call her things like whore. Now, this is a little girl that, she's in her young teens and being called a whore by her father. He would beat her, allegedly. And it was just really bad for Catherine versus how it was for Andrew. And on one specific night, there was a really bad fight between Kathy and her father, Ronald. And it got to the point where it was physical, and, he was slapping her and she ended up scratching him. And she basically drew blood from her father. And when he saw that, he lost it. He went bananas. So what he did allegedly is he grabbed a can of gasoline and doused them both and said, "We both going out. If this is the way that it's going to be, we'll both go out tonight." And he was trying his best to light a match to light them both on fire. And thank goodness their mother intervened and basically had to tell them, just give it a little bit of time. She'll be married off soon, and basically she'll be out of your hair, so you don't have to worry about it. Just calm down and walk away. It's not worth it. This is his own daughter. Around 1986, when Andrew was 11 years old, their father got sick and they found out that he had stomach cancer, and it was pretty aggressive because he was hospitalized for an entire summer that year. And Andrew spent every day in the hospital taking care of his father. Every beck and call that his father had, he was taking care of. And that was what is expected of him in their culture. That is what was expected of the children, specifically the son. Now, his mother was so distraught over the father being so ill and not getting any better that she completely fell apart. She lost it. So he's supporting the family as an 11-year-old boy. And meanwhile, his sister is off without a care in the world, not at the hospital, not visiting, doing whatever she wants to do. Eventually, the father was sick enough that he actually passed away. And the night that he passed away, Catherine finally made her way to the hospital, and she kind of just came in and said, "Okay, cool, he's gone." and went on about her business. And according to Andrew, it really felt like she was happy or relieved. There was some sign of relief that she didn't have the burden of her father around her anymore. Now, when the father had passed away, they opened up a dry cleaners in Evanston, and the mom ran it. Again, another family business, and Andrew helped out a lot with that business as well. It was no different for him. Basically, it went from Monday through Friday helping out on the weekends too. But now it was working before and after school during the week, and then on the weekends all day Saturday and Sunday they were able to take the day off, but it was to spend the day mourning their father. But basically, Andrew was now the man of the house. He was relied on for everything from his mother. And meanwhile, again, Kathy is just out doing her thing. And she wasn't around to help her mother in any way. But whenever she needed money, she was there to ask her mother for the money. And because her mother was the loving one in the family, she knew that she would get what she wanted from her mom, regardless of how she treated her mom. Now, around this time, Kathy met her soon-to-be boyfriend, who was then name was Robert Curran. He'll later change his name to Robert O'Dubain, but we'll get into that in a second. But they met at the Chicago Health Club. Now, this Chicago Health Club, I don't know so much anymore, but it used to be a very kind of elite fitness club or gym that's very expensive. It's still very expensive to be a member to. But it was a pretty elite gym club, and there's a bunch around the Chicagoland area. But he was a manager and she was a trainer at the club, and that's how they met and they started dating. Now, Robert was about 8 years older than Kathy, and he was a fun-loving guy. He was rebellious like Kathy in a lot of ways, but he was also very much a family guy. He loved being around his family. He had a lot of siblings, and they had children and things like that. So he loved being around his family. Robert himself really didn't have any direction in life either. He went through all these phases of wanting to be this or that from time to time. And he also changed his last name from Curran to O'Dubain. And that is actually the Irish version of his mother's last name. And he said that he took that last name because the Curran side of the family were trash people, and he wanted to separate himself from that. But it was also a really good way to get out of paying tickets and taxes. Now, in October of 1987, Andrew and Kathy's mother was at their cleaners in Evanston, and she was unfortunately attacked and killed in what appeared to be a robbery gone wrong. She was found in the back of the cleaners, and she had been stabbed in the face and neck over 30 times. Police immediately opened an investigation into the attack and murder, but the case has never been solved to this day. Now, after this happened, though, Catherine became Andrew's guardian. She was 18 and he was 13. So she was the legal guardian to her younger brother. What she did next was, in my opinion, pretty shady, and Andrew felt the same way, but she and Robert immediately moved into the family home and took over the mother's bedroom, removed all remnants of the mother in the house. And that just didn't sit right with Andrew. So he really clashed with his sister, and he also clashed with Robert. He really didn't like the fact that Robert was living in his family's house. To Andrew, he was the man of the house. According to their cultural values and him being the son of the family, he was the man of the house. It was his home. But his sister made it clear that once both of the parents were gone, that was her house. And she did what she wanted to do in that house. And he adhered to any rules that she set. Now, because she was the guardian for Andrew, she was also administrator over his money that he received from his mother's death. The $800,000 that he got, all of it came to him technically, but she was able to pretty much decide what happens with that money because he was not old enough to make those decisions. So she and Robert took that money to go into a business venture together. They opened a club called Club Metropolis, in Glenview, which is a northwestern suburb of Chicago. Now, she also used this money to groom Robert into the man that she thought he should be. And that included buying him $1,000 suits, buying him a Mercedes-Benz to drive, all that. So that's where Andrew's money went. Now, while she didn't spend all the money on Andrew, she did also groom him in a lot of ways. She made sure that he did certain extracurricular activities, he did certain sports, he did certain things to prepare himself to be top tier in life. And eventually it worked because Andrew got a scholarship to Providence College in Rhode Island. While Andrew is in college, things start to turn sour with the relationship and business relationship between Kathy and Robert. Kathy starts to feel like Robert is stealing from the business and using money from the business to gamble with. And he had a pretty bad gambling habit at this point, so he had a lot of debts. And it just wasn't sitting right with Kathy. She felt like she was being stolen from, although it was her brother's money that she was spending, and she just really played into that. She would call Andrew while he's at school and let him know everything that's going on between the two of them. And all of this really put a pretty sour taste into Andrew's mouth regarding Robert. Now, on one particular night in August, Kathy called Andrew saying that Robert was going through the house and he was breaking windows and he has lost his mind and she does not know what to do. So immediately Andrew, who is the savior of the family, he rushes home to confront Robert. Now, when he gets home, Robert has a gun allegedly in his hand and he's saying, "What are you going to do? This is my house. You're just a kid. What are you going to do?" And it was at that point that Andrew felt like he just completely lost any respect that was left for Robert. It was all out the window at that point. But his sister, even after he went back to school, continued to call him constantly to put that bug in the air about Robert and the things that he was doing. She was saying that he was smacking her around and beating her up. He was spending all of Andrew's money. She was definitely making sure that he got all the bad news about Robert. By this point in the relationship, too, Robert and Kathy were technically not in a romantic relationship anymore. They were living together, but they were free to see other people. Some sources say it was more of an open relationship, but they were able to date other people if they wanted to while living together. And on top of that, it had gotten so bad that they sold Club Metropolis as well. Now, according to Andrew, on one particular night, right before he went off to college, he met up with his sister for like a goodbye lunch, what they call a traditional goodbye lunch. So when he met up with her, she had a whole lot of tea to spill right before he left. Now, what she had to say was that her and Robert were having a conversation, and she mentioned in passing that there's a whole lot of money, about $800,000, that Andrew was set to get once their mother passed away. And she said that she didn't specifically say she wanted to get rid of her mother to Robert, but what she said was once she passes away, Andrew will get this money, but because he's young, I'll have to be the administrator of it and be a guardian. Now, to me, it felt like she was dropping a bug, like women do. We kind of drop little crumbs, little trail of crumbs, so that you can figure out what we want you to do without us having to tell you all the time. So basically, that's what she was doing. At least to me, it seems like that's what she was doing when she told Robert this information, because there's nothing else that he can do with this information but assume that she wants something to happen. Now, I wouldn't jump to something as drastic as getting rid of the mother completely, but something, she wants something is what he's getting out of it. But what she tells Andrew is that she thinks that Robert is the one who actually killed their mother at the cleaners. She said that she can't prove it. She didn't necessarily ask him to do it, but she knows that it was Robert who did it. Police also said that it looked like a crime of passion, which is usually done by someone who knows the victim and knows them well. So it would make sense that someone as close as Robert or someone close to the mom is responsible. So when she told Andrew that, his response was, okay, well, let's call the police. Let's tell the police that it was Robert who did it. And she said, well, I can't. We all are alibis for each other. I alibied Robert and you alibied me. So we're all linked into this. So if you report him, then I'm going to jail and you don't have anybody else. It's just you here. So you'll lose me if we report him. So Andrew felt like extremely angry because that was his mother that was taken away from him. And B, he felt at a loss because he didn't know what he could do knowing who his mother's killer was allegedly. And it just started to simmer. The tea started to simmer and it made him very angry when he went back to college. He remembered things like after his mom was killed and they removed her out of the cleaners, Andrew had to go in and clean up all of his mother's blood and clean up the actual cleaners. And Robert was right there directing him and telling him what he needed to do and how he needed to clean it up. And it just made him that much more angry. So all of this really festered inside of Andrew. Now, on September 20th, of 1993, Kathy went and bought a one-way ticket from Rhode Island to Chicago on American Airlines, and she paid cash. And this ticket was for Andrew to come back home. Catherine had called her brother and told him that he needed to come home and take care of business. This is after she had filled him with all of this anger, after she filled him with constant reminders of how bad Robert was and everything that he had done. She told him, wear some black clothes and bring a change of clothes with you. And that's it. So when they got there, she met up with him. And when she got in the car with him, he says that she handed him a brown paper bag and it had a gun in it. And she told him the plan was, I'm going to take you to the house. You're going to hide in the garage. You're going to wait for Robert. And when he gets here, you know what to do. So putting two and two together, Andrew's like, okay, she wants me to shoot and kill Robert. And according to Andrew, he was extremely angry. He wasn't sure if he was angry enough to kill someone else because of what he knew. So he waited for 4 hours in a dark garage, waiting for the door to open, waiting for his sister to pull in with Robert in the car. Now, what his sister did was she called Robert, who she told her car had broke down, something happened, and she needed him to come pick her up and bring her home. So he did just that. He came and picked her up. They drove into the garage. When they got into the garage, Andrew shot Robert twice. Now, what Kathy did not know, though, was that when she called Robert, he was actually on the other line with his other girlfriend. And he had kind of mentioned to her in passing that it was Kathy that was calling. And it's unclear if he came back on the line and said, you know, I got to go pick her up. Her car broke down, or what he said to her. But she was aware that it was Kathy that was calling him at the time. And she reported it to police after she found out what happened to Robert. Now, a few days later, Andrew had gone on the run, and the DEA actually mistakenly profiled him as a drug mule at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. This was one of the very few times that profiling somebody incorrectly based on what they look like actually paid off. Because when they got him, he had thousands of dollars along with Robert's wallet in his luggage. Andrew was taken back to Chicago so that he could be interrogated by Chicago police. And after about 13 hours of being interrogated, he finally gave a confession. Now, it was said that the written confession was over 10 pages long. And when he was asked by police why he did it, he said that it was for the obedience and the honor of his family. That is the sole reason why he did it. Police tried to say that it was for a life insurance policy that was about $250,000 or so that Robert had that Kathy would have benefited from. But Andrew did it for none of that. But on the side of Kathy, to police, this started to look like a well-planned, well-thought-out murder. 2 years later, on September 11th of 1995, the trial for both Andrew and Kathy takes place. They had the trial for Kathy, but Kathy was nowhere to be found. She was on the run. They could not find the defendant. But even with her missing, she was convicted of first-degree murder of Robert Odubeng. While she was on the run, she had a couple of aliases, and one of them was Kasha Kane. And Kasha Kane was somewhere in Hawaii at the time. She made friends, she lived this different life, but she was featured on America's Most Wanted, and one of those friends that she met as Kasha Kane saw the episode and immediately contacted police. So she also saw the episode, Kasha Kane, aka Kathy, and when she saw the episode, she thought it best to turn herself in. So she was convicted and she was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Now, there was a death penalty phase for Andrew, and they really wanted to figure out whether his part in the crime was worth the death sentence. And the prosecutors felt like he had no remorse, according to them. But luckily, instead of giving him the death penalty, Andrew was given 100 years with the possibility of parole. Now, after they were both put in prison, he said he sent a letter or a little note to his sister, reaching out, trying to support her and saying, we'll get through this together. And her response to him was, I have no clue who this is. I don't have a brother, and don't ever contact me again. That was the response that he got from a sister who he committed such a heinous crime for out of honor for his family. Now, since Andrew has been in prison, his case has been picked up and it's been worked pro bono, trying to get Andrew out of jail or get him a reduced sentence sooner than he could possibly be out currently. Now, they had originally gone through the appeals process, and the biggest reason why they were appealing was because it was said that the judge that presided over the case and the sentencing was closely connected with the victim's family, and they felt that he didn't get a fair trial because of that. Now, his appeals were ultimately denied, but now they're working on getting him clemency from the past governors and now current governor, who is Governor J.B. Pritzker. Now, he's been a model citizen the entire time that he's been in prison, and he's actually worked his sentence down so that he'd be able to be released in either 2031 or 2032. And he's worked that down from that parole possibility being 2034 originally, due to his good behavior and the things that he's done while being in prison. In more recent interviews, he's mentioned that he now has had time to think about it, and he thinks that it was probably his sister who committed the crime of killing his mother, and she just blamed it on Robert to give him the fuel that he needed to be just as angry as she needed him to be to commit a crime. And he just believed her because losing her would just ruin him. That was the last piece of his family that he had left. And as I mentioned before, he's been a model prisoner. He's even gotten certified in hospice care, and he's cared for many of the prisoners who are in their dying days in the prison. He's also been certified as an optician. So he's been doing a lot of work within prison to better himself, and he's expressed remorse over and over and over again for what he's done. And the community, the Korean community, is behind him, and they've set up a plan for him to have a job and a place to live if he does get clemency or whenever he gets out. He's apologized also to the Karan family, and Robert's brother has even said that, while he doesn't actively support clemency himself, he's not going to go and sign a petition to have Andrew get out early. He's not against it either. He feels sorry for Andrew in a lot of ways, because he really does feel like Andrew was just a pawn for his sister to use to get what she wanted. And he said that Andrew has apologized to him and the family sincerely, and he accepts the apology. He believes that he's sincere, and he's sincerely remorseful. So that says a lot in this case. Now, Andrew is currently still in prison, still actively working for clemency. If you are so moved, there is a petition that you can sign for his clemency. I'll leave the link down below. His sister Kathy is still serving her life term with no possibility of parole as well. No appeals have been approved for her. She will be in prison until she passes. That is the story of Andrew Suh and the Suh family. This story was so different for me. This is the first story where I really felt like someone's life was so unfortunate to the point where it led them to do something that they probably wouldn't have done any other day of the week, any other time in their life. I feel like because their culture clashed so much with the new culture that they were immersed into, I just feel like something is always going to happen when you have situations like these. Their culture, family is the top priority. Being the leader and dedicating yourself to your family and doing whatever it takes to keep your family safe and do the best for your family, that takes precedent over anything else, any other laws that they would be asked to follow. But on the other hand, they've come over as immigrants and become citizens. And when you become these citizens, you are agreeing to adhere and abide by all the laws that this new country has in place. So there's this push and pull of what wins out, what takes precedence. And in these immigrant communities, your culture, your values, you still hold those higher than anything else that's happening outside of your home, outside of your community. So this was just a really hard case for me to decide if I was on one side or another. It was hard for me to read what the prosecutors thought and had to say. A lot of times things are very black and white in those cases for prosecutors. Wrong is wrong, and I 100% agree. Wrong is wrong, but there is a lot more at play, especially for someone so young. So many things that were so tragic happened in this young man's life, and to have the influence that he had, who felt the way she felt about him in the first place, as such a large influence on his life. That's where that nature and nurture thing comes in, and that's where you have to consider these different cultures. That's why this is a big case that really exemplifies why Native Americans and indigenous people in their communities have their own laws and law enforcement they are required to abide by. They don't have to abide by the laws of the U.S. because on their lands, they have their own laws because their culture is so different, because their values are not the same as our values, and they won't allow Americans to force our values on them. I 1000% agree that murder is wrong. I don't care what reason you're doing it for, it's wrong. And Andrew deserved to be sentenced and serve a really good amount of time for the decision that he made. However, on the other hand, you have this culture that is so different from where they're living, the culture in which they are living in. So you have this push and this pull of which one is more important, which one is going to win out. And in their culture, afterlife matters. So while I may go to jail right now, what's going to happen to me in my afterlife? Those things all come into play. It's so hard to be on the side of he did what was right, because it's not right. I don't care what culture you are in. What he did is not right. And for me, he had the ability to make the decision whether or not to participate in this crime, and he chose to do so, knowing the ramifications of being a part of something like that, of taking another human being's life. So he deserves to pay for the crime that he committed. But on the other hand, you have a sister who is the only thing that you have left, built up in this culture of family is the most important thing. You do what it takes to protect your family and keep your family together. And being presented with losing your sister, or getting rid of someone that's not family, or having her fill his head with all of these ideas of how bad of a person Robert is and what he did to their family, to destroy their family. And he has to make it right. To honor their family, he has to make it right. So how does he win in his mind? in our minds, and a lot of Americans' minds, you don't make that decision. That's not something that you're going to do. I don't care if it's your family or not. You don't kill somebody else. That's just not a decision that you make, or you go to jail and you face those ramifications. So there's a lot at play here. So I wanted to bring this truly interesting case to your attention, and I wanted to chat about it. What do you guys think? Do you think he's deserving of a second chance at life? Do you think he needs to be locked up for the rest of his natural days? Do you think that his culture and his upbringing matters? Do you think that his community matters? What do you think about this case? He may deserve a second chance at life, and he's served his time and he's been rehabilitated for the crime that he committed, but he also committed murder. And do we just allow murderers to walk the street? Y'all let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on this case. I will put in the description box information about the pro bono work that's being done on behalf of Andrew Suh, and if you Google Friends of Andrew Suh, you'll find the website. I'll also put it down below. And they also have a petition, and it's a petition for clemency for him to be released sooner than his possible parole date. So I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts on this case, on this crime, on the role that family, upbringing, nurture plays in the decisions that we make as human beings. I want to hear all about this. This is a real conversation to be had this week, y'all. So make sure y'all comment down below. Make sure you like this video. Also, make sure you subscribe if you have not already. And until next time, y'all, it's been real. It's been real deep this week, y'all. Love you guys. Bye.